There are places in this country where the land talks louder than any man ever could. Sable Creek, Wyoming Territory, autumn of 1882. A town that lived on stubbornness alone. Silence out here wasn't emptiness. It was a language, and some men spoke it better than words. Elias Kane was one of those men, widowed 2 years, kept his fences straight and his world small. I respect him from a distance. I fixed what was broken. I fed what was hungry. That was enough. That had to be enough. After Margaret passed, I stopped counting days. Didn't see the point. One was the same as the next. People in town would nod at me like I was already buried. Polite nods. The kind you give a grave.
He came into town every second Thursday. Same list. Same silence. Same look in his eyes like he forgot why he walked in.
I tried talking to that man more times than I can count. He'd listen, nod, and leave carrying the same weight he walked in with. Elias Kane wasn't mean. He wasn't cold. He was just a man who decided he'd already had his turn at living.
Some folks in this town carried secrets like firewood, stacked them neat and pretended they didn't see the smoke. Everybody knew about the Dunn place, the big house on the hill, the cattle money, and the wife who never came to town anymore.
People would say she fell, tripped on a step, walked into a door. Nobody believed it. Nobody did a thing. I knew Clara Dunn when she first arrived in Sable Creek. Bright girl, full of questions. That brightness didn't last.
A man like Virgil Dunn doesn't need fists every day. He just needs you to remember the last time he used them. I'd see her sometimes in the general store, years back. She moved like a woman trying not to take up any space. I didn't think about her much. I didn't think about anyone much. That was the arrangement I had with the world. The days got shorter. The sky turned the color of old iron. And the wind started talking about rain coming in hard. I liked the rain. It was the one thing louder than my own head. Drowned out the questions I couldn't answer. That porch of his. 2 chairs facing the plains. One for sitting, one for remembering. He never moved Margaret's chair. Some nights I sat out there till the stars came around, talking to her, telling her about the fences, the horses, nothing important. He didn't know that night would be different. None of us did. But the territory has a way of sending people where they need to go. I went inside to light the lamp. Same as every night. Same routine. Same empty house waiting for nothing to happen. What happened that night at the Dunn estate, Manure? I can only tell you what Clara told me later.
The house was beautiful. Everyone said so. Crystal and velvet and a fireplace that could warm 3 rooms at once. 15 years I lived in that house. 15 years I learned which floorboards creaked and which words set him off. He didn't need a reason. That was the part people never understood. The reason was that he could. That evening I spoke to one of the ranch hands, asked about the weather coming in. Just words, human words. Virgil saw me talking and his face went still. That particular stillness. I knew what came next before he crossed the room. He called me his wife the way you'd call a horse yours. Not love, title, proof of purchase. The hit came fast, open hand, enough to remind me of my place, not enough to leave a mark that would show in church.
Virgil Dunn ran that house the way a man runs a business, profit and loss, and Clara was an asset he intended to keep on the books.
After he went to bed, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, just stood there, listening to the house settle. I didn't plan it. There was no bag, no money, no destination, just a door and the dark on the other side of it. I took my shawl off the hook, opened the kitchen door, and I walked out of that house like I was walking out of my own skin.
The thing about leaving in the dark is you can't see where you're going. You just know you can't stay where you are.
She walked straight into the open territory. No road, no lantern, just grass and rain and whatever was waiting out there.
The rain hit like a wall. I couldn't see my own hands in front of me. But I kept moving because stopping meant he would find me. I fell twice, maybe 3 times. My dress caught on something and tore. I didn't care. I'd been torn before.
There's a kind of courage that doesn't feel like courage at all. It feels like running out of reasons to stay still.
The cold went through the shawl like it wasn't even there. My teeth wouldn't stop. My legs wouldn't stop either. I thought about lying down, just stopping in the grass and letting the rain take me. It would have been easier. But something in me, some stubborn, angry, half-dead thing, said no, not tonight, not like this.
She crossed 3 miles of open plain in a storm that would have turned back a man on horseback. She crossed it on foot in a torn dress.
Then I saw it. A porch light. Just a small yellow glow through the rain. I didn't know whose it was. I didn't care. I climbed the steps. 3 steps. They were the hardest steps I ever took because they meant asking for something. But I couldn't knock. I couldn't make my hand do it. 15 years of being told I was nothing saying. You don't just knock on a stranger's door. So I sat down, right there on the porch boards, pulled my knees up to my chest, and I stayed.
She didn't knock. That's the part that stays with me. She made it all that way and couldn't bring herself to ask for help. She just sat on that porch in the rain, curled up against the railing like she was trying to disappear into the wood itself.
I thought, if this is where it ends, at least it's somewhere dry. At least the rain doesn't reach me here.
She didn't know whose porch she'd found. She didn't know it belonged to a man who hadn't opened his door to anyone in 2 years. That night, the territory did what people wouldn't. It pushed a woman toward the only man stubborn enough to sit with her in the storm. What happened next, Fed, I need you to understand, Love. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was the quietest thing a man ever did.
I heard something on the porch. Not a knock. Something smaller. Like a sound that didn't want to be heard. I picked up the lamp and opened the door. Expected an animal. A stray dog, maybe. Something that needed chasing off.
But it wasn't an animal. It was a woman. Soaked through, curled against my railing like she'd washed up there.
I knew her. Not well. Clara Dunn. Saw her in the general store sometimes, years back, before she stopped coming to town.
I looked at her face, at the bruise, at the way she held her arms like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart.
I understood. Right there in that 1 second, standing in my doorway holding a lamp. I understood everything.
Elias stood in that doorway for maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds that held the whole rest of this story inside them. He didn't say, come inside. He didn't say what happened. He didn't say, are you all right? He said nothing.
I couldn't ask her to come in. Didn't have the right. A strange man pulling a beaten woman through a door, that's not shelter, that's another cage. So I went back inside, and she must have thought that was it. That I'd seen her and decided she wasn't my problem.
When he closed that door, I thought, of course nobody knows. But then the door opened again, and he was carrying a blanket. A heavy wool blanket folded over his arms like something precious.
I took the blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed. Margaret's blanket. The one she made the winter before she died.
He just draped that blanket over my shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world.
I didn't touch her. Didn't fix the blanket or tuck it in. Just set it across her shoulders and stepped back.
He gave me that blanket the way you'd set water near a wounded animal. Close enough to reach, far enough to not frighten.
Then he sat down, in the chair behind me, not next to me, behind me, between me and the door, between me and the world.
I sat in the chair and I stayed. Didn't read, didn't think. Just sat there and watched the rain come down.
He was keeping watch. I knew it. He was standing guard. Finally, I'm safe. And that's when I started crying. Not from the pain, not from the cold, from the shock of being treated like I mattered.
I heard her crying.
The kind of crying that sounds like it's been locked in a vault for a decade and someone finally broke the hinge.
I didn't go to her, didn't say it would be all right, because I don't know that. I just stayed in the chair.
Nobody had ever just let me cry. Without shushing me. Without telling me to stop. Without making it about themselves.
They stayed like that. The rain, the porch, the blanket, the silence. Two strangers sharing the most honest hour of their lives. The rain didn't stop that night, and neither did he. He sat in that chair until the sky started turning gray at the edges. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I felt her breathing even out. She'd fallen asleep sitting up, wrapped in that blanket. I didn't sleep. Hadn't kept watch over someone in a long time. Forgot how heavy it feels, how right it feels. That night on the porch, it wasn't love. Not yet. It was something that comes before love. The decision to not look away. A blanket and a chair and the willingness to sit in the dark with another person's pain. That's where this story really begins. Morning came slow that day. Like even the sun wasn't sure it should interrupt what was happening on that porch.
I woke up and didn't know where I was. Then I felt the blanket. Then I smelled coffee. And I remembered everything. He was already gone from the porch. But the coffee was there, still warm, like he'd been waiting for me to wake before he left. I could see him down on the fence line, working, not looking back, giving me the space to decide what happened next.
I put the coffee out before sunrise. Figured if she woke up to something warm, she might not run. She didn't owe me an explanation. I'd done the only thing I knew how to do. Show up, stay, keep my mouth shut. Beyond that, I had no idea what came next. She stood up from that porch and walked into his house. He hadn't invited her in, she just walked in. And that took more courage than crossing the plains.
Yes. The house was so bare it hurt to look at. One plate. One cup. He'd kept her photograph but let everything else die. The curtains, the warmth, the sounds a house makes when someone is actually living in it. I thought my house was a prison. His was a tomb. Both of us trapped hordes, just in different kinds of rooms.
I knew Hattie would come. That woman had instincts sharper than any tracker I ever rode with in the cavalry.
I didn't guess where Clara went. I knew. There was only one porch in this territory worth running to, and Elias Kane's was it.
When I found her in that house, standing in the middle of Elias's kitchen, I took her hands and I looked at the bruises.
She said she fell. Of course she did. They always say that. I looked at her and I said what somebody should have said 10 years ago.
You didn't fall, Clara. You ran. And running was the bravest thing you've ever done. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to say the right thing. But all I could do was stand there and shake and tell the truth for the first time in 15 years. I said, I don't know who I am anymore. He told me what to think and what to say for so long that without him, I'm just a nothing.
I pulled that girl against me and held on. Because some pain you can't stitch or bandage. You just hold it until it stops screaming.
Hattie told me something that day that I carry like a stone in my pocket. She said, the fact that you ran proves you still exist.
I stood out on the fence line and heard him inside. Not the words, just the sound of it. A house with voices in it again.
Elias stayed outside all morning. Let us have the house. That man had the decency of a cathedral and didn't even know it.
The blanket was still on the porch when I came back up. Folded. She'd folded it and set it on the railing like something she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. That day, for the first time in 2 years, there were 2 cups on my table. I stared at them longer than I should have. What happens when 2 people who've forgotten how to be around anyone sit down at the same table? I'll tell you how. It's the loudest silence you ever heard. She sat across from me and neither one of us knew where to look. I'd been eating alone so long I forgot people watch you chew.
He'd made stew. Simple. Potatoes and whatever else he had. He set the bowl down in front of me like he was defusing a bomb. I tried to say thank you and the words came out wrong. You didn't have to. Like I was apologizing for being hungry.
She kept saying sorry. For the food, for the space, for breathing. I wanted to tell her to stop, but I didn't know how without making it worse. So I just said, the stew's better with 2 people eating it. Dumbest thing I ever said.
but she looked at me and almost smiled.
That first supper together was a mess. Beautiful, awkward, human. Two people remembering what a table is for.
The days took on a strange shape after that. She was there, but not really. Like a bird that landed on a windowsill and might fly off any second.
I helped where I could, swept the floor, washed the dishes. Not because he asked, because my hands needed something to do besides shake. He didn't assign me tasks, didn't tell me where things went. He just let me figure it out. You have no idea how rare that is.
Hattie came by every other day, checking on Clara. Checking on me too, though she pretended otherwise.
I told Elias straight. I said, your silence kept you alive, but it won't keep her alive. She needs to hear a human voice. Yours.
She said that woman has been talked at for 15 years. What she needs now is someone who talks with her. And she was right.
I knew I was pushing him. But I also knew that silence can become its own kind of cruelty, even when it means well.
One evening, after supper, she asked me about the photograph on the mantle. Nobody had asked me about Margaret in 2 years.
I asked about the picture, the woman in it. I didn't expect him to answer, but something in his face shifted.
I told her about Margaret, about the fever, about being 3 days ride away when she needed me most.
She got sick on a Tuesday. By Thursday, she was gone. I didn't get home until Saturday. The stove was cold, the bed was cold, everything was cold.
I walked into that house and knew before I opened the bedroom door. The smell, the stillness. You know death before you see it. I buried her myself, dug the hole, made the marker, and I decided that if I'd been there, she would have lived, and that meant her death was my fault.
He told me everything. And as he spoke, I realized his guilt and my shame were the same animal wearing different skins. He believed he killed his wife by being absent. I believed I deserved the fists by being present. Both of us wrong. Both of us sure. I looked at him across that table and I thought, you're not a stranger. You're the only person who could possibly understand what it's like to blame yourself for everything.
What happened at that table wasn't romance. It was something harder to name. It was two mirrors facing each other for the first time.
She didn't try to fix me. Didn't say it wasn't my fault. She just looked at me and said, I know what it's like to live in a house where you failed. And that was it, that one sentence. That was the thread that tied us together. Not love, not yet. Just growl recognition.
I never had anyone look at my pain and not try to fix it or run from it. He just sat with it, the way he sat with me in the rain.
From that night forward, the silences between them had a different texture. The way a pause in music holds the note that came before. They weren't lovers. They weren't even friends yet. They were just two people who stopped pretending they weren't hurt. And sometimes that's enough. With somebody saying, I see you, and I'm still here.
Virgil Dunn was not a patient man. When something he owned went missing, he didn't file a report. He rode out and took it back.
It took him 4 days to come. 4 days of pretending she'd come crawling back on her own. When she didn't, he stopped pretending.
She was my wife, my property under territorial law. I had every right to bring her home, and everyone in that town knew it. A woman doesn't leave a man like me. That's not how this works. I gave her everything. The house, the name, everything.
I didn't raise my voice. Never needed to. Your voice carries just fine at a whisper.
He rode into town with two men, ranch hands, big, the kind of men who follow orders and don't ask what they're for.
I heard hoofbeats that morning. 3 horses on hard ground. My stomach turned before my brain caught up with the sound. I knew that sound. I knew the weight of his horse on the road. 15 years of listening for the sound of his arrival won. You don't forget it.
The town watched him ride through. Nobody stopped him. Nobody spoke.
They just stepped off the boardwalk and let him pass.
People had their reasons. Mortgages, cattle deals, feed contracts. Virgil had his fingers in every pocket in Sable Creek.
I watched from the window of my shop, watched him ride past with those 2 men, and I thought, Lord, give that rancher the spine this town doesn't have.
I was inside when I heard him coming. Clara went white. I've seen fear before. But this was a woman who knew exactly what was riding toward her. She looked at me and I saw the question. The one she was too scared to ask. Whether I'd hand her over or let her stay.
I told her, stay inside. 2 words, she understood. I didn't have more than that. I went to the door.
I heard from 3 different people, and every one of them told me the same thing. So I know it's true.
Elias stepped out onto that porch. Same porch where he'd draped the blanket over Clara 4 nights before. And he just stood there. He expected fear, expected negotiation, expected the world to behave the way money taught it to.
She's not going back with you. Not today. Not any day. That woman is my wife, and she is coming home right now.
He didn't shout, didn't reach for a rifle, just stood on his porch like he'd been rooted there since the house was built.
You have no legal claim to her. Step aside or face consequences, Kane. I don't need a claim. She made her choice. You're on my land.
I heard every word through the wall. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them against my legs to keep standing. Part of me wanted to run out there and tell Virgil I'd go back, just to stop it, just to keep Elias safe. That's what 15 years does to you. But I didn't go. I stayed inside. Because Elias asked me to stay, and he was the first man in 15 years whose words I trusted.
Virgil looked at Elias and did what powerful men do when they meet a wall. He threatened, he puffed up, he made noise. Pathetic. But Elias didn't move, didn't flinch. And here's why, Nora. A man who's already lost everything has nothing left to threaten.
He said 6 words. I'll remember them until they put me in the ground. He said no one touches her again.
I meant every letter, every syllable, because I knew what it was like to lose someone you were supposed to protect. And I was not going to let it happen again.
Virgil saw it in his eyes. I don't know what exactly. But he went quiet. His horse shifted under him, and one of his men looked away. He left. Virgil Dunn turned his horse around and rode back toward town. Not from the law, not from a gun, from a man who simply would not move.
When the hoofbeats faded, I opened the door. He was still standing on the porch, hands at his sides, looking at the
The days after Virgil left were quiet in a different way. Not the quiet of absence, the quiet of things beginning to grow.
I woke up the next morning, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, I wasn't afraid of what the day would bring.
She asked if she could fix the fence with me. I said there wasn't much to fix. She said she didn't care. She wanted to be useful.
I'd never mended a fence in my life. Didn't matter. I held the rail while he hammered, and for the first time, my hands weren't shaking.
She wasn't strong enough to drive a post. Didn't need to be. She handed me nails one at a time and told me I was hitting them crooked.
I watched them from my window. 2 people working a fence line like they'd done it 100 times. And I thanked God for stubborn men and brave women.
Clara started doing things around the house. Small things. She put curtains on the kitchen window. Didn't ask, just did it. I found flowers she'd picked in a jar on the table. Wildflowers from the edge of the property. First color that house had seen in 2 years.
I wasn't decorating for him, I was decorating for me. I was choosing how a room looked for the first time since I was 23 years old. He talked more. Not a lot. He'd say to her, "Had a good night."
I said more in a week than I had in a year. Mostly about nothing. The weather, the stock, didn't matter what. She listened like every word counted. Weird bark. The house started making sounds again. A kettle, footsteps, someone humming in the kitchen.
I hung laundry on the line one morning. His shirts and my dress, side by side, drying in the wind.
Something was happening between them, slow as grass growing, but everyone could see it. The way she looked at the road when he rode out. Fence is done. Old South line.
Took me 2 weeks less than last year.
Maybe you had help.
Maybe that made the difference, you stubborn man.
I caught myself smiling the other day. Not at anything, just smiling. I didn't recognize the feeling at first. I'd been away from it so long.
She didn't need me to save her. She was saving herself every day she stayed and made a choice and spoke a word out loud without flinching. And I didn't need her to fix me. But she reminded me that the world keeps going, and you can either watch it from a chair or walk out into it. One evening, without a word spoken about it, she moved from the rocking chair to the straight-back chair, Margaret's chair. And I let her.
I sat in the other chair because it felt right, not because I was replacing anyone. Because that chair had been empty long enough, and he deserved someone next to him.
Sky looks different tonight. Can't say why, just looks different to me.
Maybe it's the same sky. Maybe you're the one who's different now.
Two people who thought their stories were over. Two people who believed the best chapters were behind them and all that was left was the binding. But they were wrong. They were only turning the page. And what came next was written in a language only two broken hearts could read.
She came through the rain like a ghost without a name. No suitcase, no story, just a shawl against the shame. He heard the footsteps on the boards, saw her curled against the rail. Didn't ask a single question, didn't need to hear the tale. Some doors don't need a knock to open. Some words don't need a voice to say. He brought a blanket through the darkness, and the night began to change. He buried love 2 winters back in ground too hard to dig. Kept the fence line straight and honest, kept his world contained and big. But a woman on his porch at midnight, shaking from the cold, cracked the silence he'd been dealt, like a story left untold. Some doors don't need a knock to open. Some words don't need a voice to say. He brought a blanket through the darkness, and the night began to change. She learned to speak without permission. He learned to stay instead of ride. Two people broken in the same place, found the courage side by side.